First things first about this video, J.K. Rowling is getting what she deserves in all this controversy, as we have seen time and time again. When you pander to the rabid left, when you pretend that Hermione Granger is black in the books because of a stage version of Harry Potter blackwashed her character, when you make Dumbledore gay after you already wrote the books in which his sexuality is never mentioned, when you virtue signal on every leftist campaign, when you finally say the wrong thing, you deserve the backlash. Get woke, go broke. But what she said is not entirely wrong, and I feel that it does need to be defended, because the left can't be allowed to continually ruin language to redefine words and spread pseudo-scientific nonsense. Also, this script was written after she wrote her response. I'm not going to get into the response in this video because she's defending herself. She has not retracted what she said, so this is just my take on what she said initially. So with all this out of the way, let's get on with the video, shall we? So J.K. Rowling got into trouble because she believes that biological sex is real, and to deny that is to deny women's experiences. Shock horror, I know. Let's read the tweets. If sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate, to speak the truth. 100% factual. There is nothing wrong in this statement. None of this erases trans people's experiences, but denying biological sex does erase women and men's experiences also. But of course, that is the point behind it all. Deconstruction is just another word for destruction. Ultimately, men and women have to be destroyed as concepts because not only are they inexplicably linked to each other, not just in a social sense but a biological sense, we cannot exist without each other, but not only that, it is linked to the family. You cannot have a family without a male and a female procreating. Yes, in the modern age, we can now have families of 2 fathers and 2 mothers, but that requires adoption, surrogacy, or some other kind of method to allow for children to be born. Primarily, it is a mother and a father. And these Marxists have always been against the idea of the family, not just since Engels when he wrote his famous treatise, but also since the days of Fournier, and even, if you consider him to be such, since the days of Plato. And to destroy it, they must destroy man and woman first, which, ironically enough, none of them actually tried to do. It's only the postmodern Marxists that have adopted this deconstruction. I am not sure if even J.K. understands this. Probably not. She's just seeing this from a second wave perspective, which isn't much less misandrist or crazy than the third wave, as you'll see. But she understands that at a basic level, it erases women's and gay couples' experiences. She also understands this in no way erases the trans experience. In fact, if anything, it is important to the trans experience. But these people will have none of it, because science and the real world is a barrier to their utopia. Let us continue. The idea that women, like me, who've been empathetic to trans people for decades, feeling kinship because they're vulnerable in the same way as women, i.e. to male violence, hate trans people because they think sex is real and has lived consequences, is a nonsense. Like I said, she comes from the second wave, so using men as the example of all bad things is par for the course when she mentions male violence as an example. I don't know exactly why men in particular are in some way harmful towards transsexuals. Why wouldn't women also feel repulsed by a trans woman? But that's besides the point. But if she wanted to be truly honest, she would be mentioning how most parents who kill their children are mothers, and that the worst domestic violence figures come from lesbian relationships. Nothing wrong in the message of the tweet, apart from this one thing and another. This whole kinship thing. You do not have kinship with trans women as much as you do with gay men. None whatsoever. It is artificial. Your issues are different, your lives are different, and it is pretty clear you are on opposing sides in this leftist civil war. I doubt you're even a TERF, JK, when you say such things as this, but the truth is, you were never really similar or even on the same side. And finally, her last tweet. I respect every trans person's right to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. I'd match with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it's hateful to say so. Again, literally nothing wrong with this statement, but it is to the frothing at the mouth communists She received backlash from such notables as Armoured Skeptic, who was meant to be a big believer in science. He's an atheist, you see, he's scientific. He believes in the truth, not those evil creationists and crackpots who spread woo all over the place. He's a rational, skeptical person who believes in science. Except when he's trying to ingratiate his new left-wing pals, he has to abandon the idea that biological sex is real and denounce it. Because remember, it's insufferably anti-SJW to believe there are only two genders and that gender is a synonym of sex, and that biological sex is real. Yet, what makes her insufferably SJW too? Because he also says that in this tweet. I suppose it's the feminism? I suppose it's the fact that she likes trannies? I guess it's the feminist part. Not a good look to your new pals, mate. The pitfalls of alt-centrism. Even Daniel Radcliffe was getting in on the hate train with this stupid open letter. I don't need to go into it, it's the usual stuff when a person dares to say women are women. And even our very own Lilith Lovett, who has a weird thing about the trans question. Unlike people like Blair White or Rose of Dawn, who accept that they are not biological women, and understand that it does not erase themselves in any way to say that. Lilith just can't seem to agree with that. Instead, she validates the Marxist position on Twitter constantly, like saying, because intersex people exist, therefore non-binary people are valid, forgetting or ignoring that intersex people are not true hermaphrodites like snails and slugs, but are men and women born with defects. Non-binary people are fakes who make trans people look bad and are pushing a political movement that is not only a special interests group, but also part of the Marxist attempt to control society and destroy the family. If we're all alike and similar, we're easy to control. But don't mind all that. Let's praise Radcliffe for pushing SJW narratives and attacking J.K. Rowling for saying biological sex exists. Lilith, what is it about this that obviously irks you? Are you scared it confirms some kind of deep-seated feeling within you? Or are you just on the same page as the left you're supposed to be against? Is it for validation? I can't tell, but speaking about all this stuff I just mentioned, the entire issue raises important questions. How can people expect to take the likes of non-binary, genderqueer, and even legit trans leftists seriously when they say there are more than two genders, that trans women are literal women, trans men are literal men, etc., when their eyes tell them something different? The problem for people like ContraPoints, Lilith Lovett, Armoured Skeptic, Shoe on the Head and Vosh is it's very difficult to remove the social from the biological when it comes to sex. Being a biological woman also brings with it a social element, just like being a biological man brings with it a social element. Why? Because human beings, unlike tigers, are social animals, which means out of our biology comes the social. It also means it is very difficult, some might say even impossible, for us to separate a biological female from woman, like what Lilith Lovett was trying to do, or the social element of woman from the biological female. Because to be a woman is so much more than just appearing like it. Women don't just have vaginas and breasts, or have a particular look. They act and behave in general different from men, and coupled with the biological difference, means they provide and do different roles in society. It's not even just childbirth, although it is probably the most important feature about being a woman. Those behaviour patterns, etc. also play an important role. It's why women who are infertile are still women. It also goes down to the genetic level, your type of chromosomes. Because yes, some disabled people have different chromosomes, but are still, curiously, men and women. We have had to artificially graft off the social aspect of being a human female and make it separate from the biology to incorporate trans women, and likewise, though I would argue with much less issues, with trans men and biological men. It's why when a lot of people, and I know most people will have experienced this, when they meet a trans person, especially if they can tell they are trans or they pass poorly, have a hard time calling them their preferred pronouns or forget to, because you can't have one without the other without a disconnect. They don't act completely the same as biological females do all the time. It depends on the individual, of course. But women don't tend to be aggressive in the same way that the It's a Mom tranny did in that shop. I hope you get what I'm saying. Some people would say that we are simply feeding into the delusions of mentally ill people, and that our brains, especially when confronted with your average trans person who does not pass well, or you could just tell they are trans even if they do pass, cannot accept that delusion. There's a sort of uncanny valley effect. Even if we tell ourselves that's a woman, we know it isn't really deep down. Just socially, it's a woman. even if socially they might not even be able to perform that function. Again, it depends on the individual, and that's what some people say. But the left doesn't care, their enablers don't care. It's about many things: special interests to the trans activists, societal control for the Marxists, virtue signalling for idiots like Skeptic, and potentially validation for people like Lilith. The fact that this creates issues in society, and the fact we have people denying biology and trying to change our language, though this latter was really the second way of doing it at first to combat sexism decades ago, either goes over their heads or is the point entirely. And this is probably what J.K. was trying to talk about. It denies lived experience, it denies reality, but the price for telling people the truth is scorn. Well, J.K., we did warn you. And literally, just after I recorded all of these words, yet another twist in the tale has happened, folks. So, as I mentioned before off script, J.K. had made her own statement on her website, doubling down on her opinions. However, recently, she has dropped some very personal information about herself. She has said that she is a victim of sexual abuse and domestic violence. She was coy about who she was sexually abused by, and I think she may have been open about this before, but she was not so coy about who domestically abused her. She accused her first husband, Jorge Arantes, a Portuguese former journalist she met in Porto during the 1990s, who is also the father of her daughter. The Sun newspaper reached out to Mr. Arantes to get his side of the story. In the light of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard scandal, I actually think it's only fair. Mr. Arantes told the story of how they met in a bar, became acquainted, and developed an intense relationship which became tempestuous. J.K. had miscarried before they had gotten married, and later had her daughter. But by the time her daughter was married, the relationship was already coming to an end. Indeed, they had had an altercation at a restaurant before then, in which Arantes pushed her. The police were called, and he said he was pleading with her in tears, and he loved her and didn't want her to leave. But, interestingly, on the night she said she didn't love him anymore, and was going to take their daughter with her back to the UK, they again had an altercation, and Arantes admits to slapping her. However, he denies being an abuser and described at one point that in the relationship they were either in heaven or in hell. The rest, as they say, is history, but allegedly Arantes lost his job and had become a drug addict and doesn't seem to have changed much. He did try to win some kind of custody of their child, but that obviously never panned out. The Sun was accused by the left of glorifying domestic violence, but look at the article title, read its contents. It's very clear what they think of him before they even talk to him. They don't say alleged abuser, just that he was abusive, and the article depicts him in the most unflattering light. In fact, he comes across as a prick. But he doesn't particularly care, as he says in the article, whether or not she accuses him of abuse, which is surprising to me because you'd think this is libelous if she is lying. The Sun did not glorify any kind of domestic violence in this article, and I think it's only fair to hear the other side's point of view, especially when such accusations are being hurled 20 odd years after the fact. Which brings me to the context of this. J.K. Rowling came out with these revelations immediately after she has received a massive backlash from the trans activists calling her a TERF and transphobic. She has even had a school rename a building that was named after her because of this. I do not think this is a coincidence that she chose to reveal that she was allegedly abused at the hands of Mr. Arantes in the middle of a massive controversy where her name is being put through the mud and her reputation is being destroyed publicly. She's a feminist. A second-wave feminist, but a feminist. She knows a thing or two about victimhood, and if it's one thing that I know about the current culture that we live in, is that victimhood carries with it social capital, and something that can be used as a weapon. Just recently, ethnic minority Labour MPs have been on the warpath against Priti Patel for her stance against the London vandals. Even she went down to their level talking about her victimhood in regards to racial abuse as some kind of comeback. It's not surprising that when she has the trans activists coming after her, it makes sense to come out with such things. It's not often that feminists go after female abuse victims, the grooming gang victims aside. I cannot help but feel that J.K. Rowling's reveal is anything but cynical. I have no idea if she's telling the truth or if her ex-husband is telling the truth. My gut tells me that considering her husband's rather frank admittance of at least hitting her, but denying that any abuse took place, that he may be telling the truth, and she is embellishing what happened. But it's kind of like that question, so when did you stop hitting your wife. If you answer, yes, I stopped, you're guilty. If you say no, then you're guilty. The only way around it is to say, no, I didn't, because I never started. But I cannot prove that any of them are telling the truth or not. Allegations are not evidence, as we know. It's just a gut feeling. But she's done this for a reason, and it's to save her own skin. I think it's pretty damn obvious, and it's clear from looking at Twitter that yes, people were naturally going to be distracted by such things. The Sun did nothing wrong in reaching out to the ex-husband. They did not glorify domestic violence, and this backlash has been very good for Rowling. Outside of a few people on Twitter, she's largely had it a bit quieter. Now it's hate on the Sun time. I don't think this will be the last time we'll be hearing from Rowling, or on the trans question. We're going to see the feminist movement tear itself apart from the inside, and it's going to be great to watch. And I'll see you later.